The stars looked peaceful from the bridge of the UES Discovery as Captain Jake Morrison watched the distant nebula glow with soft purple light. The year was 2387, and humans had been part of the Galactic Coalition for over 300 years. Now, Jake had served on Coalition ships for 15 years and had seen many strange things, but nothing prepared him for what was about to happen. The Coalition was made up of 43 different alien species, and they all got along well most of the time. The Xanthari were tall blue beings with big heads who could read minds and talk without speaking. The Corvin looked like giant bears but were gentle and could lift entire starships with their bare hands. The Keth were small gray creatures who were so smart with numbers that they could calculate the path of every star in the galaxy. Humans were different, though. They were not as strong as the Corvin and could not read minds like the Xanthari. They were not as smart with math as the Keth. The other species saw humans as okay at most things, but not great at anything special. Humans were good at talking between different species when they had problems, and they could fix things when they broke. That was about it. Jake did not mind this. He liked being underestimated because it meant people did not expect too much from him. His ship was supposed to be just an exploration vessel that looked for new planets and took pictures of space rocks. The crew was small and they all seemed normal. There was Lisa Carter, who worked as a diplomat and talked to alien governments. There was Dr. Amy Rogers, who studied alien plants and animals. There were 20 other crew members who did regular ship work. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when the long-range sensors started screaming warnings. Jake ran to the bridge and saw something that made his blood turn cold. Huge black ships were coming out of empty space near the edge of Coalition territory. These ships were massive and looked like they were made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to eat light itself. The first ship to respond was a Xanthari patrol vessel called the Harmony. Captain Zeph tried to communicate with the dark ships. Using telepathy and radio signals and every other method the Coalition knew, the dark ships did not answer. Instead, they fired weapons that Jake had never seen before. The energy beams looked like they were tearing holes in space itself. The Harmony exploded in seconds. All 200 Xanthari crew members died instantly. Jake watched in horror as more dark ships appeared and began moving toward the nearest inhabited world, which was Tertius Prime. This was a peaceful mining colony where 3 million beings from different species lived and worked together. Jake ordered his communications officer to contact Coalition Command immediately. The response came back within minutes. Admiral Vex of the Xanthari fleet was taking personal command of the defense. All available ships were ordered to Tertius Prime to help evacuate civilians and fight the unknown attackers. By the time the Coalition fleet arrived, it was already too late. The dark ships had surrounded Tertius Prime and were doing something terrible to the planet. They were not just attacking it with weapons. They were somehow draining the life from the entire world. The oceans turned black and the atmosphere began to disappear. Every living thing on the surface died in agony. Lisa Carter stood next to Jake on the bridge and watched 3 million innocent beings die in less than 6 hours. The Coalition fleet tried to fight back, but their weapons barely scratched the dark ships. Even the mighty Corvin battleships with their planet-cracking guns could not pierce the strange metal hulls of the attackers. Admiral Vex ordered all ships to retreat after losing half his fleet. The dark ships did not chase them. They just continued their horrible work on Tertius Prime until nothing was left but a dead gray rock floating in space. Then they moved on toward the next inhabited system. Back on the Discovery, Jake received new orders. All human settlements in the Outer Rim were settlements, and the Outer Rim were settlements in the Outer Rim were to be evacuated immediately. The Coalition Council had decided that retreat was the only option. They would pull back deeper into known space, and hopefully the attackers would lose interest and go away. Jake read the orders twice and felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had seen what these beings could do, and he knew they would not stop until every living world was consumed. The Coalition did not understand what they were facing, but Jake had a terrible feeling that he did. He walked to his private quarters and opened a sealed communication channel that he had hoped never to use. The encryption was so advanced that no alien species could crack it, even if they tried for 1,000 years. Jake typed a simple message that would change everything. Protocol 7. It is time. He sent the message toward Earth and then sat down to wait. In a few hours, the galaxy would learn what humans really were and why they had joined the Coalition in the first place. Jake just hoped it would not be too late to save everyone. The message from Captain Jake Morrison reached Earth exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes after he sent it. The quantum communication array hidden beneath the Colorado mountains received the coded transmission and immediately forwarded it to the most secure location on the planet. President Helen Davis was in a meeting about trade agreements when her aide burst through the door with a face white as snow. She handed Helen a small device that displayed only 4 words, but they were enough to make the most powerful human in the galaxy feel. Her heart stopped beating for a moment. Protocol 7. It is time. Helen dismissed everyone from the room except for General Marcus Webb, who ran the Human Defense Initiative. Marcus was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from battles that officially never happened. He had been waiting for this message for 20 years, and when Helen showed him the device, he simply nodded. For 300 years humanity had been living a lie that was so big and so complete that even they sometimes forgot it was not real. When humans first met alien life, they discovered something that terrified them. The galaxy was full of peaceful species who had never learned how to fight real wars. They had small conflicts over resources or territory, but nothing like the massive, devastating wars that humans had fought for thousands of years on Earth. The Coalition species were kind and gentle and trusting. They welcomed humans with open arms and treated them like long-lost friends. But humans looked at this peaceful galaxy and saw something that made their blood run cold. If something dangerous ever came from outside Coalition space, there would be no one to stop it. So humanity made a choice that no other species would have understood. They decided to become the galaxy's secret guardians. Every human who left Earth was trained as a soldier first, and whatever job they claimed to have second. Every human ship carried weapons that could destroy entire fleets, hidden behind false bulkheads and fake cargo holds. Every human colony was actually a military base disguised as a peaceful settlement. The genetic modifications began 50 years after first contact. Human scientists worked in underground laboratories to enhance their species in ways that would make them better soldiers. Faster reflexes and stronger muscles and brains that could process information at superhuman speeds. The changes were subtle enough that aliens could not detect them with normal medical scans. Dr. Amy Rogers had been waiting in her laboratory on the Lunar Research Station when the activation order came through. She was not really a botanist who studied alien plants. She was a military biotechnician whose job was to maintain the enhancement systems in human soldiers throughout the galaxy. The plants in her lab were actually a cover story for the genetic modification equipment hidden in the basement levels. Amy began the awakening sequence that would activate dormant systems in every enhanced human in Coalition space. The process had been designed to work quickly because if Protocol 7 was ever needed, there would not be time for gradual changes. Neural implants that had been sleeping for years suddenly came online and flooded enhanced humans with new abilities. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Stone felt the change hit him like lightning while he was eating dinner on a Coalition diplomatic station. One moment he was a normal human engineer fixing communication systems, and the next moment his brain was processing data streams from 1,000 different sources at once. His reflexes became so fast that he could see individual dust particles floating through the air. His muscles filled with new strength that he had to be careful not to reveal to the aliens around him. The transformation was happening to humans throughout the galaxy, but they had trained for this moment their entire lives. They continued acting normal even as their bodies and minds became something far beyond what any alien species had ever imagined. They kept their jobs and maintained their friendships and gave no sign that anything had changed, but the ships were different. Human vessels. Throughout Coalition space began a transformation that was impossible to hide from sensor scans. Hidden compartments opened to reveal weapon systems that dwarfed anything in the Coalition arsenal. Fake cargo holds dropped away to show missile batteries that could crack planets. Gentle exploration ships unfolded like deadly flowers to become Dreadnought-class warships. Captain Nina Torres commanded what the Coalition believed was a small research vessel studying stellar formation in the Andromeda sector. Her crew of 12 scientists were actually elite military specialists with genetic enhancements that pushed human capabilities beyond anything aliens thought possible. When the activation signal reached her ship, Nina gave the order that revealed their true nature. The transformation took exactly 7 minutes. External hull plating slid away to reveal armor that could withstand direct hits from Nova bombs. Sensor arrays extended that could track enemy movements across entire star systems. Weapon ports opened to show guns that fired projectiles at nearly light speed. Nina looked at her crew and saw them change as their enhancements came fully online. Their eyes became sharper and their movements more precise. They could now coordinate their actions through neural links that let them think and act as one mind in many bodies. They were no longer pretending to be harmless researchers. They were what humans had always been beneath the disguise. They were soldiers. The Coalition fleet near Tertius Prime detected the energy signatures from transforming human ships, and Admiral Vex demanded an explanation. Lisa Carter was still aboard the Coalition flagship when the communication came through from Earth, requesting permission to address the Coalition Council directly. Lisa smiled for the first time since the attackers had appeared. She had been a diplomat for 15 years, but her real job was intelligence gathering and psychological warfare. She knew every weakness of every alien species in the Coalition and how to exploit them if necessary. Now she was about to reveal truths that would change the galaxy forever. She looked at Admiral Vex and spoke words that had been rehearsed in human military academies for 3 centuries. Admiral, you are about to learn why humanity really joined the Coalition and what we have been doing all this time while you thought we were just good at fixing broken machines. The Coalition Council emergency session was called within hours of the first ship transformations. Representatives from all 43 species gathered in the Great Chamber on the capital world of Zentros. The room was designed to show the unity and peace of the galaxy, with each species having seats arranged in a perfect circle so that no one was above anyone else. Lisa Carter walked into the center of the circle and looked around at faces that showed confusion and fear. These beings had trusted humans for 300 years, and now they were seeing energy readings that suggested every human ship was actually a weapon of unimaginable power. The Keth representatives were frantically calculating the destructive capacity of human vessels, and their mathematical minds could not accept what their instruments were telling them. Admiral Vex of the Zenthari stood up first. His blue skin was darker than usual, which meant he was angry, and his telepathic abilities were broadcasting his emotions to every sensitive being in the room. He demanded to know what deception humans had been practicing and why they had hidden their true capabilities from their supposed allies. Lisa had prepared for this moment her entire adult life. Every human diplomat went through psychological conditioning that taught them how to reveal the truth in a way that would not cause panic or civil war within the coalition. She began with words that had been chosen by the finest human minds over decades of careful planning. For 300 years, she said, you have lived in the most peaceful era in galactic history. Wars between species have been almost unknown. Trade has flourished and cultural exchange has enriched all of our civilizations. You have built a society based on trust and cooperation and mutual respect. You have done this because someone was watching over you in the darkness between the stars. The Corvan representative made a sound like a growling bear, which was how his species expressed disbelief. He said that the coalition had maintained peace through their own wisdom and diplomacy, not because of any human interference. Lisa nodded respectfully and then activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy as humans really saw it. The display revealed monitoring stations hidden throughout coalition space that had been disguised as research outposts and communication relays. It showed patrol routes that human ships had been flying for centuries while pretending to be engaged in trade or exploration. It showed battle sites where human forces had engaged unknown threats that never made it close enough to inhabited worlds to be detected by coalition sensors. Lisa explained that humanity had been fighting a secret war for 300 years against dangers that came from the spaces between galaxies. Rogue artificial intelligences that consumed entire civilizations. Hive mind parasites that turned peaceful species into weapons of conquest. Ancient weapons left behind by extinct races that activated randomly and began destroying everything in their path. The coalition species had never seen these threats because human forces intercepted and destroyed them before they could reach inhabited systems. Every human trading convoy included warships disguised as cargo haulers. Every human research mission was actually a military patrol looking for signs of external danger. Every human colony was a forward military base designed to detect and stop invasions before they could begin. She showed them records of battles that had taken place in empty space while coalition worlds celebrated festivals of peace. Human soldiers dying in vacuum to protect alien civilians who would never know their names. Human ships sacrificing themselves to stop planet-killing weapons that would have wiped out entire species. The revelation continued as Lisa explained the truth about human physiology. The other species had always wondered why humans seemed so adaptable compared to their own people. The Xanthari could only survive in specific atmospheric conditions. The Corvan needed high-gravity worlds. The Keth required precise temperature ranges or their complex brain chemistry would break down. Humans could live almost anywhere and eat almost anything. They could breathe different gas mixtures and survive radiation that would kill other species instantly. The coalition had assumed this was just natural evolution, but Lisa revealed that it was the result of 300 years of careful genetic modification designed to create the perfect soldiers. She showed them the enhancement facilities hidden on every human world. The training programs that every human child went through that were disguised as normal education. The neural implants that were installed during routine medical procedures and remained dormant until they were needed. The muscle and bone modifications that gave humans strength and speed far beyond what their size suggested. Dr. Amy Rogers had arrived from Earth specifically for this revelation. She stood beside Lisa and began demonstrating human capabilities that had been hidden for centuries. She moved so fast that the alien security cameras could barely track her. She lifted a piece of furniture that should have required mechanical assistance. She solved mathematical problems in her head that would challenge Keth computers. The coalition representatives watched in stunned silence as Amy explained that every human in the galaxy possessed these abilities to some degree. The friendly diplomats and helpful engineers and quiet Researchers were all enhanced soldiers who could fight with efficiency that no other species could match. But the most shocking revelation came when Lisa began discussing human psychology and military doctrine. She explained that humans were the only known species that had evolved specifically for warfare. While other races developed intelligence for building tools or cooperation for survival, humans had developed the ability to kill their own kind with increasing efficiency. This natural aggression combined with genetic enhancement had created beings who could think like their enemies and predict their strategies. Humans could adapt to any fighting style and develop countermeasures for any weapon. They could coordinate massive military operations across dozens of star systems while maintaining the illusion that they were peaceful merchants and scientists. The room erupted as different species began shouting questions and accusations. Some demanded that humans be expelled from the coalition immediately. Others wanted to know how many human weapons were currently pointed at their homeworlds. The Keth began calculating whether human forces could conquer the entire galaxy if they chose to do so. Lisa raised her hand for silence and delivered the final part of humanity's confession. She explained that humans had never wanted to rule over other species or exploit their resources. They had joined the coalition specifically to protect it from external threats that peaceful civilizations could never handle alone. Every human settlement was positioned to defend coalition worlds from invasion. Every human trade route was designed to move military supplies to where they would be needed most. Every human diplomat was gathering intelligence about potential weaknesses that enemies might exploit. She looked around the circle of frightened alien faces and spoke the words that would determine whether the galaxy would accept humanity's protection or try to destroy them out of fear. You lived in peace for 300 years because we stood guard in the darkness, and now that real danger has come, we are ready to reveal ourselves and fight openly beside you, but only if you will let us. The dark ships that called themselves Devourers made their first serious mistake when they decided to attack the human colony of New Haven. Their previous victories against coalition worlds had been so easy that they assumed all species in this galaxy were equally helpless. They had consumed 3 worlds already and expected their 4th conquest to follow the same pattern of terror and helpless resistance. New Haven looked like a typical human farming settlement from space. Rolling green fields stretched between modest cities where 2 million humans appeared to live simple agricultural lives. The Devourers had studied human settlements during their advance and concluded that humans were even weaker than the other coalition species. Their technology seemed basic, and their military response to previous attacks had been limited to evacuation and retreat. The Devourer fleet that approached New Haven consisted of 50 massive ships, carrying enough firepower to crack the planet's crust and consume its biosphere within hours. Their energy-draining weapons had never failed against any target they had encountered. Their armor had shrugged off the most powerful weapons in the coalition. Arsenal. Commander Kate Sullivan watched the approaching enemy fleet from her position in what appeared to be a grain silo on the planet's surface. The silo was actually a command center that connected to defense networks hidden beneath every farm and city on New Haven. Kate had been pretending to be an agricultural specialist for 12 years, but her real job was coordinating the planetary defense system that the Devourers were about to discover. The first surprise came when the Devourers tried to use their energy-draining weapons on New Haven's atmosphere. Instead of the usual success they had experienced, the beam struck invisible barriers that absorbed their power and redirected it into the planet's hidden defense grid. Every weapon blast they fired made the human defenses stronger instead of weaker. Hidden beneath the farmland of New Haven lay defense systems that had been built over decades by humans who knew that someday something like the Devourers would come. Quantum artillery pieces disguised as irrigation systems rose from cornfields and began firing projectiles that moved at nearly light speed. orbital defense platforms that had been cloaked as communications. Satellites suddenly appeared and opened fire with weapons that tore holes in space itself. The Devourer fleet found itself facing firepower that exceeded their own for the first time since they had begun their conquest of the galaxy. Their ships started taking damage that their armor could not absorb. Explosions rippled through their formations as human weapons found weaknesses that should not have existed. But the real horror began when the Devourers managed to land troops on the planet's surface. They expected to find terrified farmers hiding in basements and storage facilities. Instead, they encountered humans who moved with inhuman speed and fought with tactical precision that seemed impossible for any organic species. Medical Officer Carl Davies had been preparing for this moment ever since the Human Enhancement Program had begun. His real specialty was battlefield medicine for enhanced soldiers whose biology pushed the boundaries of what living tissue could survive. When Devourer ground forces began their assault, Carl activated medical protocols that turned human soldiers into something that nightmares were made of. The Devourers discovered that killing human soldiers was much harder than it appeared. Humans who suffered wounds that should have been instantly fatal continued fighting with mechanical precision. Their enhanced biology could sustain vital functions, even after catastrophic damage in their neural implants allowed them to coordinate with other soldiers even while they were technically dying. Captain Jake Morrison arrived in the New Haven system with a human fleet that appeared to be responding to a desperate evacuation call. His ships broadcasted emergency signals requesting permission to land and rescue civilian populations. The Devourers ignored the human fleet as harmless and continued their assault on the planet. This was their second major mistake. Jake's fleet consisted of ships that had been completely transformed since the awakening began. What looked like civilian rescue vessels were actually military craft carrying weapons and soldiers that represented 300 years of secret human military development. Jake coordinated his attack with Kate Sullivan's ground forces using quantum communication networks that operated faster than light. Every human soldier on the planet was connected to every human ship in the fleet through neural links that allowed them to think and act as a single organism with thousands of bodies. The boarding assault began when Jake's ships appeared to be destroyed by Devourer weapons, but instead transformed into massive boarding vessels that attached themselves to enemy hulls like parasites. Human soldiers poured into Devourer ships through breach points that had been precisely calculated to cause maximum confusion and terror. Fighting inside Devourer vessels revealed the true nature of human military capabilities. The soldiers moved through alien environments as if they had been born there, adapting to different gravity levels and atmospheric conditions within seconds. Their enhanced senses allowed them to track enemies through walls, and their genetic modifications let them survive in vacuum if necessary. Dr. Amy Rogers had arrived with Jake's fleet, bringing with her the full capabilities of human scientific analysis. Within the first hour of combat, her teams had captured Devourer technology and begun the process of understanding and countering it. The mysterious weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics were quickly analyzed by human scientists working at accelerated neural speeds. By the end of the first day of battle, Amy's teams were producing countermeasures to every Devourer weapon system. The energy-draining beams that had consumed entire worlds were neutralized by quantum field generators. The armor that had seemed impenetrable was penetrated by projectiles designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in its molecular structure. The Devourers had never experienced anything like human tactical doctrine. Where other species fought defensively and tried to minimize casualties, humans embraced controlled chaos and acceptable losses in pursuit of strategic objectives. They sacrificed individual ships and soldiers to gain advantages that paid off in the larger battle. The climax came when Kate Sullivan coordinated a planetary defense action that appeared to be a desperate last stand. Human positions across New Haven seemed to be falling back in panic as Devour forces advanced. But the retreat was actually a carefully planned trap that drew the enemy into kill zones where hidden weapons could destroy them completely. When the battle ended 30 hours after it began, the Devourer fleet was reduced to scattered wreckage floating in space around New Haven. The planet's surface was scarred but intact, and its human population had survived with minimal casualties. For the first time since their conquest had begun, the Devourers had suffered a complete and devastating defeat. The surviving Devourer ships retreated to the edge of the system and transmitted a signal that no one in the galaxy had ever heard before. It was a request for communication directed at the human forces that had just demonstrated they were more dangerous than anything the Devourers had encountered in their journey across the universe. Admiral Sandra Price had been waiting in the shadows of the Kepler Nebula for over 20 years. Her fleet of 200 ships had been disguised as a deep space research expedition studying stellar formation, but their real purpose was to serve as humanity's ultimate military response if the galaxy ever faced a threat that could not be handled quietly. The victory at New Haven had proven that individual Devourer fleets could be defeated, but Sandra's intelligence networks reported that the main enemy force consisted of over 3,000 ships spread across multiple star systems. The Devourers were not just raiders or pirates. They were a civilization dedicated to consuming entire galaxies, and they had been doing it for millions of years. Operation Prometheus was humanity's answer to this threat. The plan had been developed by human military strategists who understood that defeating the Devourers would require tactics that would horrify the peaceful coalition species. Humans would have to become something darker and more ruthless than their enemies in order to protect the innocent civilizations that could not protect themselves. Captain Tony Martinez received his orders while his ship was disguised as a medical supply transport near the coalition border. The message was transmitted through quantum channels that existed outside normal space and could not be intercepted by any known technology. Operation Prometheus would begin simultaneously across 50 star systems in exactly 72 hours. Tony's ship was one of dozens that had been secretly positioned throughout Devourer-controlled space over the past several weeks. They had infiltrated enemy territory by pretending to be refugee vessels fleeing from conquered worlds. The Devourers had ignored them because their energy signatures appeared to be those of damaged civilian craft barely capable of faster than light travel. The transformation began when Tony activated the command codes that revealed his ship's true nature. External hull sections fell away to expose weapons that had been developed in secret laboratories for over a century. The medical supplies in his cargo holds were actually quantum mines that could destabilize matter at the atomic level. His crew of 12 nurses and doctors were enhanced soldiers with genetic modifications that made them faster and stronger than any baseline human. Throughout Devourer space, similar transformations were taking place as the human fleet prepared to demonstrate why their species had been feared by everything that lived in the darkness between galaxies. The Devourers had made the mistake of assuming that humans were like the other coalition species. They were about to learn that humans were something completely different. Commander Beth Williams led the first wave of attacks against Devourer supply lines that connected their main fleets to their home territory outside the galaxy. Her squadron appeared to be retreating in panic when Devourer ships moved to intercept them, but the retreat was actually a carefully planned maneuver designed to draw the enemy into a gravity well trap. The trap had been prepared weeks earlier by human engineering teams who had seeded the space around several star systems with devices that could manipulate gravitational fields. When the Devourers followed Beth's ships into the killing zone, the devices activated and created artificial black holes that crushed entire enemy fleets into Singularities. The Devourers had never encountered weapons that could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. Their technology was based on energy manipulation and biological consumption, but humans had spent centuries developing ways to use physics itself as a weapon. Stars could be turned into bombs. Planets could be moved to block enemy advance routes. Space itself could be folded to create shortcuts that allowed human forces to appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours. Lieutenant Colonel Ray Parker commanded a special operations unit that had been studying Devourer psychology since their first appearance. His team had captured enemy soldiers and civilians during the New Haven battle and had spent weeks analyzing their thought patterns and decision-making processes. Ray's analysis revealed that the Devourers were not actually a single species, but rather a collective consciousness made up of billions of individual organisms that functioned as a hive mind. Their greatest strength was their ability to coordinate massive fleets and armies as if they were a single organism, but this also created a critical weakness that humans could exploit: the psychological warfare. Campaign began when human forces started broadcasting signals that were designed to disrupt Devourer hive mind communications. The signals contained patterns that confused their collective consciousness and made it difficult for them to coordinate their responses to human attacks. Individual Devourer ships began acting erratically as they lost contact with the central intelligence that controlled their civilization. Dr. Amy Rogers had established research stations throughout the battle zone where human scientists worked around the clock to analyze captured Devourer technology and biology. Her teams discovered that the Devourers were actually artificial constructs, created by an extinct species millions of years ago. They had been designed to consume other civilizations and use their resources to build more Devourers in an endless cycle of expansion and destruction. This discovery led to the development of weapons that specifically targeted the artificial biology that kept Devourer organisms alive. Human ships began deploying viral agents that attacked Devourer life support systems and caused their ships to break down from the inside. Entire enemy fleets started dying as their crews succumbed to biological weapons that had been tailored to exploit weaknesses in their constructed physiology. The turning point came at the Battle of Cygnus Gate, where General Marcus Webb personally led a human force of 500 ships against the largest Devourer fleet ever assembled. The enemy had gathered over 800 vessels in an attempt to break through human defensive lines and reach the Coalition core worlds. Marcus used tactics that would have been considered insane by any other species. He allowed his fleet to be completely surrounded by superior numbers and then activated quantum weapons that had been hidden throughout the Cygnus system for decades. The resulting explosions destroyed 90% of both fleets but eliminated the TIA Devourers as an effective fighting force in that sector of the galaxy. The human survivors of Cygnus Gate were rescued by ships that emerged from hidden bases that the Coalition had never suspected existed. These bases had been built inside asteroids and dead planets throughout the galaxy and contained enough ships and soldiers to continue fighting for centuries if necessary. As news of human victories spread throughout Devourer space, their collective consciousness began to experience something it had never felt before: fear. For millions of years they had been the ultimate predators in the universe, consuming everything they encountered without meaningful resistance. Now they faced a species that seemed to be even more efficient at warfare than they were. The final psychological blow came when human forces captured a Devourer command ship and interrogated its collective consciousness directly. The Devourers learned that humans had been monitoring their approach for months and had prepared countermeasures for every weapon and tactic in their arsenal. More terrifying was the revelation that humans had been fighting similar threats for thousands of years and had developed their entire civilization around the concept of protecting weaker species from external dangers. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers sent a communication to their enemies. It was a request for negotiations transmitted on frequencies that indicated they were ready to discuss terms for ending the conflict. They had finally encountered something more dangerous than themselves, and their survival instincts were overriding their programmed drive to consume everything they encountered. The diplomatic meeting that would determine the fate of the galaxy took place on the neutral station of Harmony Point, which orbited a star at the exact center of Coalition space. President Helen Davis arrived aboard a ship that looked like a simple transport, but was actually one of the most heavily armed vessels ever built by human engineers. The Devourer representative was unlike anything the Coalition species had ever seen. It was a massive biomechanical construct that stood 3 meters tall and seemed to be made of living metal that constantly shifted and reformed itself. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once, as if the station itself was talking. Helen sat across from this creature in a conference room that had been designed to accommodate beings from dozens of different species. Behind her stood General Marcus Webb and Dr. Amy Rogers, along with other human leaders who had spent their lives preparing for this moment. Around the room sat representatives from all 43 Coalition species who watched with fascination and terror as humanity negotiated with something that could have destroyed their entire civilization. The Devourer spoke first, and its words revealed the true scope of what the galaxy had been facing. It claimed to represent a collective consciousness that spanned multiple galaxies and had existed for over 10 million years. Its purpose was to prevent universal stagnation by consuming civilizations that had become too comfortable and complacent. According to its logic, species that could not defend themselves deserved to be eliminated, so that their resources could be used to create stronger life forms. Helen listened to this explanation without showing any emotion on her face. She had been trained in negotiation techniques that could break down the psychological defenses of any known species, but the Devourers were something entirely new. Their collective consciousness operated according to principles that were completely alien to individual minds. When the Devourer finished speaking, Helen stood up and delivered humanity's response. She explained that humans had encountered this philosophy before in their own history, when various civilizations had tried to justify conquest and genocide by claiming they were improving the universe. The results had always been the same: destruction of beauty and diversity in favor of cold efficiency. She told the Devourer that humanity rejected its fundamental premise. Civilizations did not need to be strong in a military sense to deserve existence. The Xanthari, with their art and telepathy, contributed things to the universe that could never be replaced. The gentle Corvin, with their philosophy and engineering, created wonders that enriched every species they encountered. The brilliant Keth, with their mathematics and science, advanced understanding in ways that benefited everyone. The Devourer responded that these contributions were meaningless if the species that created them could not survive natural selection. It argued that the universe was a hostile place where only the strongest had the right to exist, and that by protecting weaker civilizations, humans were actually causing harm by preventing evolutionary progress. Helen's reply revealed the fundamental difference between human and Devourer thinking. She said that humans had learned through millennia of warfare that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the willingness to protect. Any species could develop weapons capable of wiping out planets, but it took real strength to use that power in service of something greater than yourself. The negotiation continued for hours as both sides explored the philosophical differences that separated them. The Devourers saw the universe as a machine that needed to be constantly optimized through conflict and consumption. Humans saw it as a garden that needed to be tended and protected so that all forms of life could flourish. Dr. Amy Rogers presented evidence that humanity had collected during their secret war against external threats. She showed records of dozens of species that had been saved from extinction by human intervention. Some had been threatened by natural disasters that human technology had prevented. Others had been attacked by rogue artificial intelligences that human forces had destroyed. Still others had been consumed by parasites or plagues that human scientists had cured. The data revealed that human protection had allowed coalition species to develop in ways that would have been impossible in a universe governed by pure survival of the fittest. Art forms that required centuries of peace to perfect. Scientific discoveries that could only be made by minds freed from the constant fear of destruction. Social structures based on cooperation rather than competition. The Devourer Collective consciousness processed this information and came to a conclusion that surprised everyone in the room. It announced that humanity represented something it had never encountered before. A species that had evolved the ultimate survival trait not through individual strength but through the ability to ensure the survival of others. It explained that in 10 million years of consuming civilizations, the Devourers had never found a species that could match their adaptability and ruthlessness, while also possessing the psychological framework necessary to protect rather than exploit weaker neighbors. Humans were simultaneously the most dangerous military force the Devourers had encountered, and the most committed to preserving life. The final agreement was reached when the Devourer consciousness acknowledged that humanity had proven its point. Through force of arms, any species capable of inflicting the casualties that humans had demonstrated during Operation Prometheus clearly possessed the strength necessary to survive in a hostile universe. More importantly, they had shown that they could use that strength to protect others rather than simply conquering them. Devourers agreed to withdraw to the Galactic Rim and cease their attacks on coalition worlds. In exchange, humans would provide them with detailed information about other external threats that might pose dangers to the galaxy. The Devourers would serve as an early warning system against invasion while humans maintained their role as active defenders. The aftermath of the agreement required a complete restructuring of coalition government and military organization. Captain Jake Morrison was promoted to admiral and given command of the new Galactic Defense Force, which would openly coordinate human and alien military units for the first time in coalition history. Lisa Carter became the first human to serve as Coalition Security Council chairman with authority to deploy military forces anywhere in the galaxy without requiring approval from individual species governments. Her job was to ensure that the galaxy would never again be caught unprepared by external threats. The final ceremony took place in the Great Chamber, where Lisa had first revealed humanity's true nature. Representatives from all coalition species gathered to witness the signing of the new Galactic Compact, which established humanity as the official guardian force for the galaxy while maintaining the peaceful cooperation that had characterized coalition civilization for centuries. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her new flagship and looked out at the stars that humans would continue to protect. The galaxy was forever changed, but it was safe. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, human ships patrolled the borders, ensuring that the peace their species had purchased with blood and sacrifice would endure for generations to come.